A new FBI memo warning about the possibility of armed protests across all 50 state capitals ahead of Inauguration Day. A senior law enforcement official also saying that an armed group is threatening to travel to Washington to stage an uprising if President Trump is removed from office. NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter joins me now. Tom, what else do you know? What else can you tell us about these potential protests, and how are law enforcement agencies preparing given the security failures we saw at the Capitol last week?
Right, Allison, two great questions. So the FBI's National Crisis Coordination Center put out a memorandum. It's coming from information gathered by the ATF, the DEA, the Park Service, Parks Police, I should say, the U.S. Marshals, DOD, essentially putting together and saying, well, what are we seeing out there that's open source? What are we hearing from our own sources of information? What are we getting from social media? And a couple of key themes emerged as a result of that reporting. The first is this idea that starting perhaps on or around the 17th of January, there's going to be the potential for armed protests at state capitals, and particularly the state capitals where there have been issues raised as far as the electoral vote tally and certification that's been done. So I think we all know the states at this point. And then on top of that, you've got some reporting that if for somehow Congress invokes the 25th Amendment on or around January 16th, that there could be a armed uprising in the nation's capital, where, of course, we just had problems. Now, of course, there's an issue with that, Allison. Congress can't invoke the 25th Amendment, so not quite sure where all that's coming from. But the bottom line is, look, this is very consistent with what we saw leading up to the 6th. This is very consistent with what we've seen since online and in social media. And we've got a situation where we have a segment of the U.S. population that believes that there is a need for an armed protest or armed uprising at various sites to protest the results of this election. And obviously, law enforcement, if anybody needed to be woken up to that fact, an alarm clock of epic scales went off last week.
Yeah. All right, Tom, let's talk more about last week, because there is still so much to figure out and unpack from Wednesday. The FBI initially said they had no indication of potential violence last Wednesday, but your reporting tells a very different story. What are you hearing from your sources about what happened in the lead up to the rally and the riots at the Capitol last week?
Right. So clearly there's a disconnect, right? So on the FBI side, it's the reporting of my colleague Ken Delaney, that there was an effort by the FBI to knock on doors, to visit with people they might suspect would travel to D.C., people that are extremists that might try to carry out acts of violence. So there was an effort there. We know from the reporting from myself and my colleague Jonathan Dienst that the NYPD sent a note through their Operation Sentry, which is an effort to coordinate and collaborate with law enforcement agencies across the country, almost 800, Allison, an advisory saying, look, we're seeing a lot of threats, we're seeing a lot of rhetoric surrounding the election, surrounding the electoral tally. They sent that leading up to the 6th. Besides that, they sent a separate memo directly to Capitol Police, which, according to our reporting, was even more detailed about potential threats and potential rhetoric that was occurring online. So those reports tend to be fairly detailed, comprehensive analysis, and include actionable intelligence. So we know that went out as well. We know that they weren't the only agency that was involved with this either. There, Allison.
Tom, I want to play a clip from Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney this morning describing what he saw inside the Capitol last Wednesday. Here it is.
I was on the other side of that door when those people were breaking down the glass. And on the Senate side, that Capitol police officer lured that mob away, because what was going on the other side of those doors was that senators and members of Congress were being escorted down internal stairways to safety. But it was about 60 seconds earlier. If they had gotten there 60 seconds earlier and breached those doors, you could have had a mass hostage situation that might still be going on with dozens of members of Congress.
Tom, we've also learned that 2 men who had zip tie style restraints are now being charged with federal crimes. Do we have any sense or any idea if some of these rioters had plans beyond just breaching the Capitol?
Yeah, and since we just got the court documents, we can also add taser to the list of things that one of those men had on their person, Allison. We don't yet know the full scope of the plot or the plans. You know, what's happening right now is federal law enforcement, they're just trying to make arrests and get these people that are very clearly seen in pictures like the one we're looking at, to get them into handcuffs, to get them off the street, and to figure out what the heck the actual plan was here, to the extent that there was one. Who else could be out there that they need to get to? And they basically just need to do the bare minimum from a law enforcement standpoint to make arrests and get this done. We'll have to see when indictments come out in the future if the potential plots or the ideas in the sense of how big this could have gone, see if that starts to work its way out in future court paperwork, Allison.
Tom, it was terrifying when it happened last week, and the more we learn about those riots, about the attacks, the more details we get, it's just absolutely horrifying. Thank you so much for helping us to really better understand what's going on last week and what could be coming in the next few days.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.